Hello, welcome to MarketBeat Monday, everyone. We are so glad that you are here to join us. I hope you had a great 4th of July weekend. And now it's back to work and back to the market. There's a lot happening today and a lot to dive into. Here to break down all of the market moves with us today are MarketBeat analysts Chris Markoch and Thomas Hughes. Thomas, great to have you back from vacation. We missed you the last couple of weeks, but glad you had some fun with your family. There are so many names to get to this week, of a lot going on, but we have to start with the biggest topic, and that is tariffs. Tariff news are back. It's the talk of the game today. It's also why we're seeing some red in that heat map today. So I guess, Thomas, why don't you start us off with what's kind of going on in the market today and why we're seeing so much red?
Well, right. Today was kind of a topsy-turvy day for news because we were expecting to hear some positive news on trade deals that I don't really think materialized. But then also the tariff fears were reinvigorated. Now, my take on the news is that no new tariffs were introduced and no tariffs are going to be enacted this week. But the possibility of reciprocal tariffs is still on the table for some of our major trading partners, and the new potential date for them to be enacted is August 1st. So we're kind of in that same holding pattern we were before. The market definitely didn't like hearing about it again, but I think ultimately it was a nothing burger as far as the news goes, and that the market could snap back pretty quickly.
That's what we're hoping for anyway, but right now it's kind of a hard way to start a first Monday back. We all know last week we saw record highs for the first time in a long time, so it was great to see last week. I know, Chris, you and I talked about a little bit that there's likely to be some profit taking last week because we were seeing these new highs. People were anticipating these things a little bit. Do you think that's some of what's happening right now, Chris?
I do. This to me today seemed like pretty much an ideal sell the news day. I think anytime you come out of a long weekend like we just had, and the market was so strong going into the weekend that you just kind of anticipated that today might be a day that it sold off a little bit, especially unless we got like a really big, unexpectedly positive tariff and trade announcement, and we didn't get that. And plus, this is what you and I talked about last week, Bridget. I would expect that you're probably going to see a little bit more. You could see some volatile moves to the upside and the downside this week because, again, there's really not going to be a lot of economic data coming out, and we don't start earnings season until next week, and that's when investors are going to get stuff that they can really sink their teeth into.
Yeah, going to be a little bit of play the headlines right now, I think, for the rest of this week, it feels like, with just the different tariff announcements coming out. I want to talk about one of the stocks hit hardest today, and that's Tesla. They had some of the biggest losses today. Thomas, what's going on with that one? Why such a hard hit for Tesla? And I know it has to do a little bit with some of the Twitter feuds back and forth over the weekend.
Yeah, right. Tesla's day-to-day movements have really nothing to do with the business or the stock's quality. The latest move is due to this announcement or belief that Elon is going to start his own political party. His feud with Trump has certainly taken a new twist that could pose some risk for his business. So Tesla was down 7%, definitely one of the biggest losses of the day, big impact on the index. But generally speaking, the heat map didn't look too bad. Big tech, Apple, Google, Oracle were down more than 1%. But generally speaking, most stocks were flattish for the day. Taking it back to Tesla, there are some big swings day to day, and there have been some big movements over the last few weeks, the last few months. But what I see in the chart is this market is kind of narrowing down within a range, and we might actually be getting down to a level, a range, a price point where we can say Tesla is, sort of fairly valued because the bulls and the bears have been fighting it out so well, and we've kind of narrowed this to this point of equilibrium, and we'll see how that goes.
All right, very good. Let's talk about some of the big tech names really quick before we get to the different stocks coming in. First off, I want to thank everybody for joining us in the chat. We're so happy you're here. I love to see all the stock tickers that you guys want us to talk about coming in. I'm going to do our best to get to some of these. We've got a couple of names we're going to hit first, and then we'll dive into the names that you're suggesting. The first sector we're going to talk about today is just tech. We want to talk about some of those big tech names like NVIDIA that saw new all-time highs again last week. What are we expecting this week? And are we seeing a huge change, or are we still right near those all-time highs?
It looks to me like NVIDIA barely moved today. So out of all the big tech names that were moving today, NVIDIA moved the least. It closed with a loss of not even a full percent. Looks
Yeah, it was
pretty
about a
flat
half a
compared to the
percent.
last couple of weeks. The chart looks pretty bullish. To me, it looks like NVIDIA is just kind of hanging out, ready for its next move higher. Today's news was really, cause for a pause, not for a pullback. The next day we get some good news. I would expect to see this stock moving up to set new highs again.
Yeah, very good. Let's get to some of those lesser known tech names out there. These are from some of the comments we saw over the weekend, over all of last week, of stocks that people are commenting on that they want us to talk about more. And somebody just mentioned in the chat too. So East Coast, Kev, we're going to get to this one too. SoundHound. Let's start with that one, just because it's a name a lot of people are familiar with. Thomas, I know it's a company that you've been really interested in, and we talked about several different times. So let's talk about what's happening with that stock right now.
Well, right. So this company, the stock price has pulled back. In the charts, what I'm seeing is a bottom forming after that initial surge we saw last year. But the company is shifting towards profits. It's in a phase of accelerating hypergrowth. It's being driven by new deals, expansion into new verticals, expanding client bases, upselling, deepening penetration. It's got very many levers to growth for its revenue and for its earnings. The analysts are also getting on board with this stock, helping to support that bottom. So what I'm seeing is a high potential, for this company to continue accelerating, continue outperforming expectations, continue driving that analyst positive cycle, and continue that bottoming and that reversal. To me, I think SoundHound's a real winner. Over time, I would expect to see this stock rebound and be retesting at recent highs. So right now we're looking at, it's about 1140. If we can get above 1150, I think that 1250 will be real soon. Once we get past 1250, we're back into full reversal mode. At that point, we could get up to the $20 range pretty quickly, I think, provided we have some good reports.
Thomas, you're closer to SoundHound than I am, and one thing that I'm noticing, and I don't want to say it's like another stock that I won't name, but this stock doesn't seem to have a lot of institutional interest in it. I looked on our site, and it looks like it's only got about 20% institutional interest. So is this is this too heavy of a lift for retail right now, or?
It's possible. It's possible. It depends on what it is, what the catalysts are. But like I'm saying, the growth outlook is looking really nice. And with that in place, I can see retail investors driving this thing higher. As far as the institutions go, let me check on this.
Yeah,
I know that it's not as heavy as some other stocks, but it's right. But they're buying on balance. They're buying pretty strongly. They're accumulating this year. So they're providing a tailwind for the market. They're part of this bottoming action. I would expect to see their interest begin growing over time, and certainly provide a tailwind for the market.
Very good. That's a good look at SoundHound. Now we've got some other names that we want to get to. This one is a new one that we've not talked about on the channel. It is one of the most searched stocks on MarketBeat right now. And it's also just a new name to talk about that we've had viewers who want us to talk more about. And that's PSIX. This is, again, a new company we've not talked about before. It's Power Solutions International. Chris, what can you tell us about this one?
Yeah, so this is a company that they design and manufacture advanced powertrains and propulsion systems. They've been primarily focused until recently in industrial markets. So, you're talking about just off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember. Anyway, it's been focused in industrial markets. I'm sorry.
Right. And so powertrains for like vehicles and for like industrial movers.
Yes. Forklifts,
exactly,
irrigation pumps, that sort of stuff. And recently it's made a pivot to where it's now focusing its efforts on what it calls its power systems division. And that's leading us into the data centers. And so it's becoming a data center play. And that is obviously being very well received by shareholders because the stock has made a significant move in the last month.
Yeah, I've got the chart pulled up right now, and it's quite a significant move to see how much it's up.
Right. When I saw the chart, my thought was wow. This chart, when you look at it, has got everything going for it. It's really a textbook play for a chartist. We've got an uptrend. We've got increasing volume. We've got all the major moving averages pointing higher. We've got convergence and extreme peaks in the momentum, all things that are pointing to a bullish market that's getting stronger and stronger as the days go by. The most recent price action is a pullback, but the candles that I'm seeing right now suggest consolidation at a high level and not a correction. So if we get a consolidation at this level and then move on to set a new high, this market could jump from where it's about 75 now to the $150 range pretty quickly after that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's quite the move for that company, and it's just good to get it on people's radar if you haven't heard of that one yet. I also love to see all of these innovative companies kind of making this transition from doing something else. They were kind of started as something, and then they turn into data center plays, and that's been so popular for a lot of these companies. Another name that we've talked about before here on the live stream is Applied Digital. That kind of started out as that Bitcoin play, and it's now very much into just a data center company more than anything. Let's give a quick update on Applied Digital. I haven't seen it in the chat yet, but so many of our people have liked to hear about that one. There's been a pullback in Applied Digital. I'm pulling up the chart right now. Who wants to take a quick look at why that one might be seeing some downtrends right now?
Well, I wouldn't call it a downtrend. It is a pullback. The stock had recently broken out of a trading range and set a new high. So this pullback is natural market mechanics. We've pulled back to retest that resistance point for support, and right now we have support at that level. So assuming that the market's able to maintain the levels where it is now and begin to edge higher again, I would expect to see it actually begin an uptrend and move on to set a new high. However, if it struggles with its current level and falls, much further from where it is, it'll probably stay range bound at these levels until there are some more good news comes out.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna talk about this probably with another stock coming up, but this is a stock that's going to be one of the first to report. It reports like July 24th. So again, it's natural that with the stock that was kind of trending that high, that there's going to be a sell-off now. So it gives it room to grow, especially if that earnings report comes in well.
All right, I've got another tech name here that somebody just mentioned in the chat. Amir wants to hear about Unity Software. I know this was on the list of potential things to talk about because we've had a couple of people commenting, asking to talk about Unity. Can either of you talk about that one really quick? I'll pull up the chart.
So we're talking about UNIT.
Just Unity Software. The ticker symbol is U. And it looks like it's up almost 60% in 3 months, having a really good uptrend just in the last few days. Interesting one, Amir. Thanks for bringing this one up. This company is a leading provider of real-time 3D development. So 3D tools, gaming, film, automotive, just another software tech play kind of out there. Have you covered this one before, guys?
We have.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Yeah, they've got a lot of exposure to games and gaming. They've been struggling, I think. The chart certainly looks like it wants to move higher, the price action. Right. Businesses in contraction.
It looks like they're getting involved in the business of doing like training programs for airlines and for railroads and stuff like that. So that it looks like they're trying to expand into a new vertical.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got a future, but there's a lot of headwinds right now. They don't really have a lot of traction with their business. So yeah, that's shifting away. Then they have been shifting away from gaming for some time, I think. It's just a matter of time to see how that plays out. But if they're able to maintain some traction, expanding into these new markets, then we should see the stock price set new highs and potentially enter a reversal. But I think until then, there's a lot of risk of it just moving sideways.
Good. If you've not been with us before on this live stream, we cover the stocks that you bring up at the moment. So we're looking at stocks that you mentioned in the chat. We're looking at stocks that came up from comments that we saw on videos on our YouTube channel. We post every week or every day in the YouTube channel. And so when people comment there and ask us to talk about different stocks, I add it to the list of things to talk about during our Monday live streams. So we're covering it, but for Chris and Thomas, this is kind of the first time they're getting a look at some of these names. So they might not have, you might have to give them a minute to take a look at the chart and give a quick analysis on what's going on. One that I did give them a little heads up on, it's a stock we've talked about on the channel a lot in the last couple of weeks, and that's BBAI. I had another question from a viewer wondering if now is a good time to get in because it is more towards the higher end of where it's traded at before. So do you think right now is a good entry point, Thomas, for getting into BBAI?
Yeah, I would be real careful with that one. There were a lot of issues with BBAI before this recent move. This move has been sparked by its decision to shift into commercial business. So it's kind of following in the footsteps of Palantir, as we've been noting in the past. So yes, maybe it can do this. Yes, maybe it can't. Right now, the stock price is moving higher, but it's moving up quickly to a potential ceiling. If we can see this market get above, get above the $10 level, I would call it a buy. Until then, it's a speculation and it's a risky one that you're going to want to be careful of.
Yeah, this is the one I was talking about before, Bridget, when we were talking about the other stock is. So here's BBAI has earnings coming up on July 30th, and again, to me, the chart's just kind of setting up that you might see some choppiness and even a little bit of a pullback ahead of earnings. And then that way investors are kind of hedging their bets on which way that earnings report's going to go.
Yeah, it'll be
But
interesting.
certainly if they have strong earnings, you could see this thing take off.
Right. It certainly is a company that you would think would be doing very well.
Yes.
The results and the outlook is not showing very much traction. And I think that's mostly because it's a late comer to the game. It's got much larger competitors that are already well established that are just going to provide a headwind and hurdles for its entire existence.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes out from this earnings report. Like you said, Chris, I think that could make some big moves in this one. Well, we talked about that one a lot, so you can watch some of our other content on that one. Let's look at some other tech names. I'm trying to remember some other ones we want to talk about. Wolf was another one. This is another new name. Somebody commented during the week who wants to hear a little bit more about what's going on with Wolf. So Thomas, why don't you take that one?
Right. So Wolfspeed is it's a niche semiconductor company. They've been struggling with profitability and debt for a long time. The market looks like maybe it's near a bottom. We've got volume is rising. Recently had some good news with their announcing a turnaround plan. They've got a new CFO. They're going to restructure and reduce their debts. However, even with all of that, they're not expected to be profitable for quite some time. So there is a lot of risk with this one. This is a stock that you could put on your watch list and hope in the future that we start seeing some traction with the business. But people that want to get into the stock today need to remember that the recent upswing is driven entirely by short covering. Even the huge volume spike, the stock was 50% short at the last report. So we can expect that probably 100% of the recent volume spike was short covering. The risk now is that the shorts will just wait for the price to drift back higher and they'll reposition and cap gains at some higher level and just keep this market trapped down where it is.
Yeah, I love to get some of these smaller names out. Thanks for the suggestions coming in too of these different companies to talk about. I want to move us to another company that is a new name for us to talk about, and that is CF. This is more almost an energy play, but not quite. This is a name that was suggested in the comments. Chris, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so this is a chemical company. They do they're in the agricultural space. Interesting thing about this company right now is that they are in the sweet spot as it relates to tariffs because this is a company that is going to benefit from higher priced Canadian fertilizer due to the tariff situation right now. The chart looks really interesting on this one right now. I'll probably let Thomas talk about that a little bit more than I will, but this is a company that could be it looks like you're paying a premium for this one right now, but investors might be willing to pay the premium if this thing has the upside that it looks like it could have. It's had a nice pullback, but it looks like it found some support and is bouncing a little bit higher.
Yeah, right. So this is a nice cash flow company with a good dividend.
Yeah.
And like you said, Chris, the stock pulled back and bounced off some strong support. Looks like it's trying to move up and break out of this trading range. And like you were saying before, it does have some support, for the business because there's the tariff situation, but there's also the EPA is trying to raise the quotas for biofuel contents in our gasolines. And so that's also going to help support this company. And in addition to all this, we have the analysts raising targets, also providing a tailwind for the business. So it's very possible that this stock could continue to edge and drift higher over the course of the next few months.
Yep.
I think I want to go from CF to talking about a name that's come up in the chat a couple of times now, and that's SMR, or New Scale Power. I'm going to pull up that chart right now to give you guys a little bit. I think we've talked about it maybe once before. This is more going into that small modular reactor, clean nuclear power energy, kind of talking about the energy plays again. And this one looks like it's had a really strong year. Year-to-date performance up 105% year-to-date. The last month up about 7%, nearly 5% up in the last 5 days. Overall, energy has been a really kind of low sector. We saw a lot of downtrends in energy over the past couple of months. Even oil prices still not getting any movement, even with all of the geopolitical issues. So I think it's interesting to talk about, are we seeing any traction on these nuclear stocks, including what could be happening with NuScale to get kind of this positive price action that we're seeing?
Well, right. NuScale and Oklo, the two leading small modular reactor manufacturers, are both doing very well right now, because there's lots of very positive trends for their business. Not only was demand for their products increasing before Trump took office, but since he took office, he signed numerous executive orders bolstering the nuclear industry, which really has both of these stocks rocketing higher. So right now what we're looking at are these two companies who are on track to begin commercial operations within the next few years, having red tape removed, having federal assistance offered to them, having their industries bolstered by the government, while demand is increasing from the private sector. That demand is centered in data centers and the need for AI power. So both of these stocks doing very well. As far as the stock price, this chart is also very bullish. We have convergences in the MACD. The market's at a new high. We're seeing support at critical moving averages. So I would expect, even with the pullback, that we would be seeing retests of the all-time highs or new highs being set very soon.
Yeah, this one has, as I was looking at it, Bridget, some of the recent price action is probably a little bit due to short interest, because it's got about 20% short interest. But for a lot of the reasons that Thomas just talked about, this is one of those where I think you could buy into this rally, because again, this is a company that you're seeing regulations be reduced, so this shouldn't just be a something where you just say, okay, well, this is just a case of short covering. No, this rally probably does have legs. And they report in early August, so we have to wait about a month before we hear from them. But this one looks strong.
Well, right, and all this hope that we're talking about is being backed up by an improving deal pipeline. So at the same time, all these hopeful things are driving the stock. They're actually signing deals, getting letters of intent that are saying, "Hey, we want your products. We want you to build us reactors. We want to have this much, power come online in the future," which is really helping provide and clarify the revenue and the profitability outlook. This one, NuScale is supposed to be online within the next 2 years, I think, within 3 years for sure. And within the first year of operations, they're going to be profitable. I mean, that's fantastic. So
It's good news. You did mention Oklo, and somebody else in the comments asked to talk about it. So I've just got that chart pulled up here too. It is a very similar story to what NuScale is too. Like you said, seeing a lot of strength right now. The chart definitely shows what we saw, just an interest from investors. We saw so much interest in investing in nuclear from that December early part of the year. Then we saw it dip down, but it's right back, like you said, for many of the same reasons you just said. Anything else you'd share about Oklo that sets it apart from NuScale?
Well, so the real big difference between these two companies is the type of technology they have. They're both building the small modular reactors, but NuScale is focusing on the traditional reactor style, which is like what is being used today around the world for the big, large reactors. And then Oklo is using at more advanced technologies where they're using liquid metals to cool the reactors, and they're supposed to be have better efficiency and also more able to reuse spent fuel as fuel. So one of Oklo's other advantages is that it's heavily investing in the recycling of nuclear fuel. So it will theoretically be able to turn all of the United States nuclear waste into usable fuel one day down the road.
That'd be, yeah.
Very interesting company. Well, let's move on to some other names that we have to talk about and that some of our viewers want to talk about. I love to see all of these suggestions coming in. Thanks for all of the comments, guys. We love to see it. And we love to have you join us on an afternoon at market close just to kind of break down what's happening in the market. Let's get to air taxis, EVTOLs. We've talked about this sector quite a bit on this channel. I know a lot of our viewers are interested. We've heard Joby Aviation, we've heard Archer Aviation, but there's another new name that people want to hear about this week. And this is a new one for me. I had not heard of it before. This is Surf Air Mobility. So let's talk about this one. Chris, you want to tell us a little bit about this company?
Yeah, so to set the stage for investors who may not have heard about this one. So you've got your commercial airlines, and then you've got the Jobys and the Archers, which are focusing on the urban air transportation, which are the little short hops from an airport to downtown and vice versa. And then you've got the regional air, and that's the space that Surf Air primarily plays in right now. They have a fleet of planes. Some of them work with airlines. Some of them work as private jets for obviously various audiences. Interesting company. They've got a deal with Palantir as they're trying to, I guess, upgrade, modernize their fleet. There's been interest in the company. I think it's kind of just due to this whole move towards urban air mobility and what the potential opportunity for this company is. One of the things that Thomas and I were talking about before we came on was one of my concerns about the company is like there's a lot of competition, but a lot of the competition isn't public. And then you've got companies like Joby and Archer, which are public, but are looking to possibly be able to punch up into Surf Air's market at some time. I don't necessarily see Surf Air being able to punch down into the urban air market, but Thomas came up with an idea of how Surf Air might be looking to play into this EVTOL space.
Well, right, the company is leaning heavily into electrifying lots of different parts of the small aircraft arena. EVTOL fits right into that. But when you think about Joby and Archer, they're having to build out a network that they can then populate with their aircraft.
Right.
Surf already has a network. All they need are the aircraft. They've already got a platform for connecting riders with rides. So it seems natural for them to be able to just kind of take over the EVTOL, the regional air mobility market, in a very Uber-like manner.
Right.
There'll be some interesting moves for this industry. I'm just going to pull up, just for interest's sake, showing a chart comparison between, here's the Surf Air Mobility, at least their chart, and then I'm going to just give a quick update on Joby and Archer and have you guys talk through, Joby is seeing some big boost, kind of looking like new all-time highs, at least for the year, and then Archer, a little bit lower trending than Joby is right now, but both still seeing that, like, the rise that I think investors are looking for. So what catalysts are we seeing? Is it just because they're getting closer to actually crossing the finish line on some of these launching of their products?
Yeah, right. I think with Joby, the current upswing is due to some testing in Dubai. They did some piloted testing, affirms their progress with that nation. They've signed a contract good for several years. But really not a new development, just kind of positive affirmation of what we were already expecting. So it's possible that the stock will top out here pretty soon until we actually get our commercial licenses operating. But like you were saying, both those companies are working very hard towards commercial viability. We expect them to have their licenses and their certifications by the end of the year, and for commercial operations to begin, if not by the end of this year, then in the first half of next year, and if not in America, then somewhere overseas, like in Dubai, where we already have these air jet ports, being built and being prepared for their services.
All right, I'm going to move on to a similar stock. It's not EVTOL especially, but John wanted to know about this one, and it's a good one to talk about. They've had a lot of movement. We haven't talked about them for a while, but AST Space Mobile, ticker ASTS, or ASTS, yes. They had a big jump. They were doing really, really well. From the start of June, they were at about 24, and they jumped all the way up to about 52, and now down to about 45. I loved the concept of this company. It's definitely something to be excited about. Let's talk about what's going on with this stock.
Well, the business has momentum in the form of a growing number of government contracts, an expanding network, and a growing pipeline of potential business with all the major carriers worldwide. I think some of the most recent news is they've secured some non-dilutive funding, which is really awesome for the business and for shareholders. As far as the stock price goes, we've seen that big rise since earlier this spring, since the beginning of June. We're at new highs. I think that this market could continue rising over the next few months.
Yeah, it's a really interesting stock to watch. Thank you for bringing that one up. We've got a few other names to get to here. So many people asking about different companies. One that has been a common discussion topic in the chat is Capital One. There seems to be some big news with that one today. So I'll give you some time to bring that one up. And then another one, Rivian is another discussion. We haven't talked about Rivian on the channel in quite a while, so we'll get those two charts pulled up. Let's see, Chris, if you've got time to talk about Capital One, I want to give you enough time to look into that one a little bit.
Yeah, I need to look into that one a little bit. Yeah, sorry.
Right.
I wasn't aware of any news coming out other than that Jim Cramer said he liked it. So
Right.
Well, the chart
I
shows
see that they've been growing, underperforming, but growing.
it was down pretty sharply today.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to give us some time when we're
All
going
right.
through
So
some
what
of
I
these
see
polls.
here is Capital One stress test results were really good. Their buffer has improved.
Okay.
They've been redeeming some debt. So I think what we're seeing here is improving balance sheet, improving fundamental quality, right? Improving dividend health, all being reflected in the stock price.
Good news for them. Well, that's a quick look. I know we didn't get into it too much.
Sure.
Let's go on to some other companies here, just because there's so many different names coming in, and we've got about 10 minutes left of our conversation today. Kind of hard to know which direction to go because we've got so many different names coming in. Guys, did we talk about all the names that we wanted to when we first started? I believe we did already. We've got to the air taxis. We covered CF.
I think so.
Here's another one to look up. I'll have each of you look up a different company. IREN, that's one ticker that was mentioned early on. So Chris, if you want to look up that one. And then
Sure.
SYM, let's go to that one. SYM for Thomas, if you want to look that up.
SYN.
SYM like mom.
That Synergia Energy? No, that's not right. That's not even American.
Symbiotic, sorry, Symbiotic.
Oh, Symbiotic. I like Symbiotic.
Symbiotic, sorry, I said it wrong.
Right on. Symbiotic's all about automating warehouses. I haven't had a update for them for a few quarters, but it looks like the stock is moving pretty nicely right now. So Symbiotic builds automated warehouses. They're heavily involved with Walmart and Amazon. They've got a deal to offer their service on a like a rental basis. Targets backlog, huge backlog. Right on. So this is just a great company that's building traction. It took them a while to build that traction, but it was they're starting to to gain it after after the excuse me. They're starting to gain that traction after a few years of not quite doing it the way we were expecting. Looks like analysts are okay with it. Yeah, I mean, it's a good stock and it's a good company. It definitely has a good, strong future. The stock price is certainly responding favorably to the recent news.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that is hard to see sometimes. I love when we talk about these stocks when they're seeing a big run up, which is exciting to see. Obviously, there's huge momentum for the companies, but it's hard when you see these big spikes to wonder if it's a time to get in or not, because you've got the spike up, but then you look at what the analysts are saying, and the analyst consensus on this one especially is 18% downside from where it's at today. So is there enough? Right. Is there enough innovation there to make up for that?
So that's a good thing to point out, that the consensus is below the stock price, but it's the trend and the sentiment that really matters. And if you look down lower on the page, you'll see that the amount of coverage has been steadily increasing for the last 2 years. So more and more analysts are covering the stock. bringing more and more investors along with them, providing a larger support base over time. At the same time, sentiment's firming. So we've got some strong buy ratings creeping into the mix. So we have a firmer sentiment. And at the same time, the stock price has begun to move higher again. So one of the things weighing on the price action last year were some price target reductions. What we have going on right now in the spring are some price target increases, which are helping to improve the sentiment, helping to lift those trends and provide some support from underneath, not really leading the market higher, but helping to push it higher over time.
Michael Anthony says SYM never made a profit, so that's important to talk about. The cash and no profit for the company. I think that maybe is more of a common story. I'm not sure, Thomas, about these up and coming companies, that there's that period where it takes a while for them to become profitable. Do you any idea how close this company is to getting to that point? Give you some time to look it up. Sorry.
All right, I'm just checking it out. Yeah, it looks. I mean, it's shifting to profitability now. I mean, it's not growing, it's not profiting greatly at the moment, but it is shifting to profitability. And as it begins to execute on its growing backlog, profitability will improve. What I'm looking at here, the consensus estimate is for a high, solidly high double-digit CAGR through the middle of the next decade.
Good. Very interesting. Well, I want to get to IREN. Chris, we're going to have you talk about that one. And then Thomas, while he's talking about that, I want you to look up another one. PG is very interested to hear about NAK stock, Northern Dynasty Minerals. So I'll let you talk or look that one up, Thomas, while Chris is talking about IREN.
Yeah, so IREN, I think you're talking about Iris Energy Limited.
Yes.
I think that's what we're talking about. So yeah, this was actually a company that I just heard about for the first time last week, so it's kind of interesting that you brought it up now. Company, again, I'm just going to repeat this for people that aren't familiar with this. So this is a data center play, but what makes this company kind of unique is that the purpose for them of owning and operating these data centers and the electrical infrastructure is completely to mine Bitcoin. And their sites are powered by 100% renewable energy. And so the company, the stock's been moving up higher recently. Today it just announced that they gave a mining update for June, and they said that the company had mined 620 Bitcoin last month, and that it generated record monthly revenues that obviously were driven by the fact that Bitcoin's moved higher in the last month. And that was despite the fact that they mined 7 less Bitcoin than they did in May. So the chart looks really strong. It's made a big move in the last month, up 74%. Right now, analysts still believe that this thing can go higher by about 20%. So it looks strong right now. Again, this is kind of a Bitcoin / data center play, but interesting right now.
Yeah, very interesting company. Thanks for bringing that one up in the chat. I like to see these different companies that are coming out. Thomas, have you had enough time to look up the other company?
Yes, it looks like this company is waiting on an EPA decision that's tied to a mine in Alaska that is potentially going to be opened by some of Trump's decisions recently. Mm-hmm. So it looks like a positive catalyst for this market. The chart's looking pretty good. We've got increased volume. We have convergent MACD. So as long as the decision comes through favorably, I would expect to see the market continue to rise. The risk is that a lot of the gains may become priced in pretty early. So it's possible that we'll see a pretty sharp pullback and some consolidation before the company actually starts to mine this property and make money and is able to get that stock price to a new high.
Yeah, it's a tiny stock too, and I think you always got to expect some volatility in those penny stock names. I know the hope would be that it could go even higher, and it's such a low entry point to get in.
You're right.
Yeah. I'm interested to see part of these MarketBeat Mondays is also just gauging what our viewers are interested in. And it does seem like a lot of people are interested in these value plays and the penny stocks. the lower cost stocks that they can get into hopefully early and see some really big growth. And so we hear you. I like to see these different names coming in. So we try to throw those in the mix with some of the other bigger names that are out there too. Let me look at just a couple more stocks. We've got 5 minutes left, and so we can get to just a couple other names out there that are interesting to look at. I believe we covered that one already. While I'm looking up a couple other last minute names to talk about, Thomas, why don't you start off with just some of the things you're watching in the market this week? What are you watching out for that could be market movers coming yet this week?
Well, I think the big market mover this week, aside from the Trump news cycle, will be the FOMC minutes on Wednesday. So the FOMC declined to reduce rates at the last meeting, but did affirm an outlook for 2 rate cuts this year, which I think, based on the data, is pretty hopeful and optimistic. So the minutes are probably going to reflect, well, they'll show what the committee is really thinking deep down inside. So we may see whether or not they really believe it's going to be 2 cuts this year. I would expect the rhetoric to lean more towards 1 cut and the wait and see mentality. As it is, we're still really waiting for Trump's tariffs to have their full impact on the economy. As it is, we're still muddling along. We're still pretty resilient. We still have positive job growth and wage gains and a pretty resilient consumer. So with all that in play, I don't see the FOMC cutting rates twice this year. So the minutes will be a pretty big event, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to keep in mind for investors this week. Chris, I'm going to have you get to what you are looking ahead to this week. But while Chris is giving his answer, Thomas, I've got the last couple of stocks that we're going to talk about on our MarketBeat Monday this week. And that's just looking at some biotech companies. I know that we've had comments throughout the week of people interested in looking into some different biotech health plays. So there's a couple of names here. Mohawk, I saw your comment on Beam Therapeutics. So Thomas, you can look at Beam, BEAM. And then the last one we talked about on this channel before, but just an update on NUTX Health. That's NUTX. So we'll cover those 2 names before we wrap up for the day. But Chris, why don't you give us some of the things that you're looking ahead to this week, or some big market movers you might be seeing yet this week?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any really huge market mover, aside from, again, the possibility that you're going to hear about major deals made with companies like India. If you see something like that break, that might be a market mover. I agree with Thomas that the FOMC meetings are going to be revealing, but I tend to agree with Thomas. If I had to guess and do the over/under on 2 rate cuts this year, I'd probably take the under.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who would agree with you on that one, Chris and Thomas. All right, let's get into these last 2 names, and then we're going to wrap up here on MarketBeat Monday. I think these are both really interesting. Beam Therapeutics, I will share this. I just looked on the headlines and some of the news that might be making a move, and there's that new buy rating to talk about. It looks like HC Wainwright reiterated a buy rating with an $80 price target, which is interesting for a stock that's around $19 right now. Thomas, anything you wanted to share about that one? That's just the latest headline on this stock anyway, which is an interesting one to look at.
Right. So I don't know much about it, but it looks like they're having some positive test results for a sickle cell disease treatment. And they recently got orphan drug status from the FDA. So those are all positive tailwinds for the business. It should help them generate revenue and, potentially profits over the, over the long term, which are all positive drivers for the stock. We had the analysts responding favorably. There's really nowhere for the stock price to go but higher. Let me check on that and see what they're saying in general. 1 upgrade, 1 price target increase doesn't really mean as much as, a trend of them. So MarketBeat tracks 15 analysts. I'd call that a pretty fair amount. 13 rate the stock as a buy. That's pretty solid. At the consensus, they're looking for 150% upside. Also pretty solid. Price targets are on the rise. That's also a positive indicator. Coverage is rising. Right. So this stock is set to pop, provided it can release some positive news. I think it's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. Mohawk, thanks for suggesting that. I do, every time we talk about biotech, I like to talk about the potential risks that are out there. If you've never invested in biotech before, important to talk about. Headlines make so many moves in this industry, and there's also just such a risk sometimes that we've seen these companies do really, really well, and then they get a recall, or then they have something happen in trials that crashes the stock. So anyone else, Chris or Thomas, either of you want to share a potential warning for investing in biotech?
Yeah, you just got to be careful.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of research. You have to keep up with all of the pipeline, all of the trials and the studies. Biotechs are really they're a risky buy and hold and forget kind of investment. You got to find one and buy a little bit of it and then forget about it for the next 5 or 6 or 7 years until it's able to develop what it's developing and put its medicines to the test and get approvals.
Right. And there's always the risk that they're just not going to make it through the clinical trial. So you just have to, you have to have conviction. And like Thomas says, they're ones you have to go into with the idea that you're going to be holding it for a long time.
Right.
Especially if you're buying it at this level. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking to get into pharma and med tech as an investor, a buy and hold investor, where you're going to see steady, stable returns beginning this year, you're going to need to look for companies like AbbVie and Abbott and Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, which are already established and have safety nets and have pipelines and have portfolios of profitable, treatments. Otherwise, it's just a big risk.
Yeah. Well, Beam was a good name to look at as a potential, getting to this stock potentially before it pops. This next one is just a great story to end on some really explosive growth. Let's talk about NUTX Health. This one has had quite the year. It's in a little bit of a pullback now, but still just an incredible growth story looking at this chart. This is the NUTX stock ticker. Chris, is there anything you can share about this one?
Yeah, we have talked about this before. And again, I found it interesting. We talked about it last time. So basically what the company's trying to do is they're trying to provide what they call concierge level healthcare, and they're trying to make that accessible to all communities. They operate a series of what they're calling micro hospitals and such, and I think they said about 20. Let's see, they operate 24 facilities in 11 states, and the whole idea is they're trying to bring the urgent care closer to the patients. It's an interesting concept, to be honest. I'm just looking at this again, Bridget, with kind of fresh eyes, so I'm just diving into it right now. But one of the things that you notice is that the stock's up about 296% this year, and analysts believe that the company still has another 100% upside. So it's already been almost a triple bagger this year, and the analysts believe it can go significantly higher still. So it's one I would probably need to dive into a little bit more. Maybe we come back to this one next week, but certainly there's a story there.
I think sorry, Thomas, I'm just interrupting, but I think the most interesting story, just looking at the chart, is that last August, this was trading at $6.
Right.
And it's now 126. So if you were in a year ago, that 2,400% growth is great for your portfolio. I love to see that. Thomas, what were you going to say?
Well, what I'm seeing in the results is, the company started making money last year, about 2 years ago, has entered a hyper growth phase, is already profitable, making pretty significant profits. Based on the trends over the last few quarters, the outlook for next year is probably pretty light. Profitability still looks pretty good going forward. So this is definitely a viable business with a pretty strong growth trajectory. So I think that if we can see evidence of them executing on that and growing its base, then the stock price will continue to move higher.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you guys so much for diving into all of these different companies. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your stock suggestion today. I've just kind of been scrolling through and getting to as many as I can. It's a lot to manage in a small time. So Chris and Thomas, thanks for diving into these today. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us here on MarketBeat Mondays. We love to have you. We love to hear what you're interested in during these live streams. We'd love to hear from you during the week, too, if you check out all of our videos that post every Tuesday through Friday, and again on Sundays. If you comment comment about what you're interested in there. I will read it and I'll add it to the list of stocks to talk about too. So thank you again for tuning in today, everyone. As always, happy investing.